Revenge rarely looks like a spontaneous explosion of emotions. More often, it ripens quietly in hospital corridors, in apartments after court hearings, in back rooms at work, where humiliation and powerlessness have been accumulating for years. In these stories, there are no accidental victims and no heroic motives. Only ordinary people who decided that justice would not come by itself and took it into their own hands. Each of these deaths was the end of a long chain of insults, decisions, and silence that lasted too long. Enjoy watching. California, spring 2017. Cameron Doyle worked as a wedding photographer and had an impeccable reputation among agencies that served expensive ceremonies. She was used to being around people at moments when they let their guard down, allowing themselves unnecessary words, gestures, or intimacy without thinking about the consequences. After each event, Cameron kept complete archives of the shoot, including footage that was never shared with clients. Over time, these files ceased to be just working copies. They became leverage. Several clients received unambiguous hints that certain footage might accidentally appear on the internet or reach specific recipients. No formal threats were made, but the message was clear. People paid, remained silent, or simply disappeared from her life, trying to forget about contact with her. There were almost no official statements, because each of the victims was more afraid of publicity than the photographer herself. Jake Randall was one of the few who decided not to put up with it. He hired Cameron to shoot his engagement, after which, in a few weeks, his fiancée received a series of anonymous messages with photos taken out of context. The explanations didn't work. The relationship ended instantly, and Jake lost his job because of the scandal, which quickly went beyond the private sphere. He went to the police, but there was not enough evidence of direct blackmail. Cameron denied everything, claiming that someone was trying to ruin her reputation. The case was closed, and for her, it was another confirmation of her own immunity. She continued to work, publishing glossy photos, writing about trust and professional ethics, not realizing that the story was not over for Jake. A few months later, he wrote her a message with a proposal to meet and calmly discuss the situation without any lawsuits or scandals. Cameron agreed without hesitation, taking it as another attempt by a weak man to find a compromise. They met in a city park near a pedestrian bridge, which was crowded during the day and empty of people in the evening. The conversation quickly lost its neutral tone. Jake talked about his ruined life, and Cameron replied coldly and arrogantly, not hiding the fact that she was not afraid of anything. There were almost no witnesses around. When the argument turned physical, it happened in a matter of seconds. Cameron lost her balance and fell from the bridge to the concrete below. Doctors pronounced her dead on the spot. Initially, the incident was treated as an accident, but a check of her phone and archives revealed that her activities were followed by a long chain of ruined lives. For Jake, this encounter was the end of the story, in which revenge replaced justice. Ohio, summer 2016. Ryan Miller has long been accustomed to the idea that there are no serious consequences in his life. At the age of 29, he had a stable job, a new car, and a family ready to solve any problem with money. This is what saved him after the accident that changed the lives of another family forever. Late at night, Ryan was returning home from a meeting with friends. He was speeding and didn't notice a child on a crosswalk. The impact was fatal. The 6-year-old girl died before the ambulance arrived. The case was considered quickly and without much publicity. The lawyers insisted on the accident version, the alcohol tests were disputed, and the court limited the sentence to the minimum. For the child's mother, Emily Carter, this decision was the final confirmation that justice is not for everyone. She was an ordinary woman, working in a supermarket and raising her daughter alone. After the funeral, her life narrowed down to a few repetitive activities: work, an empty apartment, a cemetery. She kept the court papers in her kitchen cupboard and read them at night, returning to the details of the case over and over again. Over time, grief gave way to cold focus. Emily began to notice that Ryan had not changed his lifestyle. He drove his car again, went to bars again, as if nothing had happened. She saw him several times in the city, and each time she saw him, it only reinforced his sense of impunity. She began to study his routine, learned where he worked, which roads he took, which days he returned late. No sudden movements, no threats. Everything looked like a woman trying to put her life back together. One evening, Ryan did not return home. On a country road, his car missed a curve at high speed and crashed into a fence. According to doctors, he died instantly. At first, the police talked about a technical malfunction, but when they examined the car, experts drew attention to the brake system. One of the hoses was damaged in such a way that failure was inevitable at the first sharp braking. No signs of accidental wear were found. The investigation slowly but surely led to Emily. Surveillance cameras captured her near the parking lot a few days before the accident. During the interrogation, she did not deny her presence, but for a long time she remained silent about her motives. Only in the end did she say that the court had already decided everything, and she just made this decision in her own way. For the investigation, it was a crime. For her, it was the end of a story that began on a pedestrian crossing and did not end in a courtroom. Florida, December 2019. Sabrina Lewis appeared in other people's lives in a vivid and destructive way, leaving behind broken families and a sense of humiliation that has not faded over time. She worked in real estate, but her real passion was for other people's relationships. Sabrina easily gained trust, quickly found weaknesses, and did not hide her satisfaction when another family fell apart. For her, this was not a tragedy, but a proof of her own superiority. She posted photos from expensive hotels, captioned them with ironic phrases, and hinted that she always got what she wanted. One such story was an affair with David Carter, a married man with 2 children. His wife Kelly found out about the affair not from words, but from bank statements and photos that Sabrina didn't even try to hide. The divorce was quick and painful. David left, leaving the family with debts and promises he never fulfilled. For Kelly, it was the end of her normal life. She worked as an accountant, tried to keep everything under control, and explained to her children why their father no longer lived with them. The hardest part was not the divorce itself, but the feeling of public humiliation. Sabrina didn't stop after that. She would send Kelly messages with hints, laughing at her old life, and writing that only the strong survive in the modern world. Kelly reread these words many times, never responding. Outwardly, she looked calm, but inside, her faith in any form of justice was gradually disappearing. She turned to lawyers and tried to settle the financial issues through the courts, but the process dragged on, and David was less and less in touch. That's when Kelly decided to put an end to it herself. She wrote Sabrina a message with a proposal to meet and talk calmly without scandal. The tone was reserved, almost polite. Sabrina agreed right away, taking it as another opportunity to humiliate the person who had lost. They met at a hotel on the coast where Sabrina often stayed. The room was decorated in light colors, with panoramic windows and a balcony overlooking the city. The conversation began with formalities, but quickly turned to mutual accusations. Kelly talked about children, about destroyed stability, and about how some things are not measured by money. Sabrina responded coldly and dismissively, calling it weakness and an unwillingness to accept reality. She openly said that she had no regrets and that she would have done the same thing in Kelly's place. These words were the final push. The conflict escalated, the voices rose, and the physical distance between them disappeared. What happened next lasted a matter of seconds. Sabrina was at the balcony door, trying to leave the room, but lost her balance. Her fall from several floors was fatal. Security and police arrived quickly. Initially, the incident was treated as an accident or suicide, as there were no signs of tampering in the room. However, a check of the phones and correspondence revealed that the meeting had been arranged in advance, and the motives for the conflict went far beyond a random quarrel. Kelly was detained for questioning. She did not deny the meeting, but insisted that she had not planned the murder. For the investigators, it was a case of revenge. For her, it was a moment in which years of humiliation, silence, and powerlessness came together and ended in the death of a person who considered herself untouchable. New Jersey, fall 2018. Molly Raines worked as a financial advisor and gave the impression of a person you could trust. She spoke calmly, wore discreet clothes, and always emphasized that she specialized in helping elderly clients who had difficulty dealing with documents and bills on their own. It was this reputation that allowed her to operate without undue attention for years. Molly didn't take the money abruptly. She gradually changed the terms of contracts, offered temporary solutions, transferred funds between accounts, and convinced her clients that she had everything under control. Most of her victims were elderly, often alone, with memory or health problems. When the money disappeared, they could not clearly explain how it happened, and their relatives learned about the problem too late. One such victim was Margaret Lewis, a 78-year-old woman who had worked in a library all her life and was saving for a quiet retirement. When the money in her account disappeared, her niece Anna, who handled medical bills, noticed. She tried to find out the situation through the bank, but everywhere she went, she encountered signatures and documents that were formally executed correctly. Molly Raines' name appeared in every file. Anna went to the police, but the case moved slowly. Meanwhile, Molly was confident and did not hide the fact that such complaints were not new to her. She openly said that elderly people are often confused and make up problems that don't exist. This neglect was a turning point. Anna began to gather information on her own, studying other cases where Molly's name appeared. It turned out that there were many more similar stories, but none of them went to court. Under the pretext of a possible settlement, Anna contacted Molly and offered to meet at a country house where they were supposed to sign new documents. Molly agreed without suspicion, treating it as just another routine matter. The house was off the main road, and during the meeting, the conversation quickly turned from formalities to accusations. Anna laid out all the facts, but Molly just smiled and said she couldn't prove anything. Her confidence in impunity destroyed any vestiges of restraint. Events unfolded quickly, without witnesses and without the possibility of intervention. When help arrived, Molly was already dead. The case was classified as a premeditated murder, and during the investigation, dozens of episodes of financial abuse that had remained hidden for years surfaced. For the investigators, it was a story of a crime motivated by personal motives, and for Anna, it was the point at which she no longer believed that the system was capable of protecting the weak. Michigan, 2015. Dr. Howard King was considered one of the most successful cardiac surgeons in the state. His name often appeared in the clinic's promotional materials, and he was presented to patients as a specialist who was not afraid of difficult decisions. Behind the closed doors of hospital rooms, these decisions were often dictated not by medical necessity, but by financial gain. Howard prescribed invasive interventions where medical treatment was sufficient, explaining to relatives that the risk without surgery was much higher. Most believed him because he spoke convincingly and confidently. One such patient was Richard Moreno, a 62-year-old man who was brought in with moderate chest pain. The examinations did not indicate a critical condition, but Howard insisted on an urgent surgery. During the intervention, complications arose, which he tried to hide by shifting the responsibility to individual characteristics of the body. Richard died 2 days later without regaining consciousness. His daughter Laura worked as a nurse at the same hospital and knew the internal protocols well. She had seen her father's medical records, knew the results of his tests, and realized that surgery was not necessary. When she tried to question the management, she was advised not to cause problems and to focus on her work. The official complaint was ineffective, and Howard King's name appeared again in the list of the best doctors of the year. For Laura, this was the final proof that the system was not going to admit mistakes. She continued to work, maintaining her outward calm, but a clear decision was gradually forming inside. Laura knew how the hospital worked, who had access to the drugs, and how easy it was to hide critical details under the guise of routine. She did not act impulsively and did not leave any traces. On the day Howard was preparing for a planned intervention, everything looked like a normal workflow. He joked with his colleagues, not realizing that for someone else, this operating room was the end of a story that began with the patient's death. During the preparation, drugs were used that looked no different from the standard ones. The reaction came quickly. Howard's heart stopped even before the operation began. Resuscitation measures did not work. Initially, the death was attributed to a sudden complication, but a toxicology test showed abnormal results. The investigation found that there was a deliberate interference. Laura was detained without resistance. She did not deny her involvement and only said that her father had also entered the hospital, trusting the doctor, and never left. For the court, it was a murder case. For her, it was an attempt to put an end to where official procedures had refused to put one. Texas, 2016. The story began with a conflict that at first glance seemed petty and long overdue. Several young people lived in the same neighborhood and regularly gathered together until one of them, Sarah Hale, went to the police after another quarrel involving noise and threats. Formally, the case ended with a warning, but for the rest of the company, it was humiliating. They believed that Sarah had taken the trash out of the house and ruined their reputation. The open confrontation quickly gave way to ostentatious indifference, but the resentment did not disappear. Over time, the idea of teaching her a lesson began to sound like a joke, and then a plan. They knew that Sarah was fond of videos with extreme stunts and had long dreamed of trying something like that. That's what they decided to play on. She was offered to shoot the video at an abandoned industrial facility, assuring her that everything would be safe and look spectacular. They assembled the equipment themselves, using parts that visually resembled professional ones, but had never been tested. In their correspondence, they discussed that it would be a good lesson and that she would be scared, but nothing serious would happen. On the day of the shooting, Sarah arrived without suspicion. She trusted the people she had spent a lot of time with before and did not ask too many questions. The preparations looked convincing. The cameras were set up. Someone was joking and encouraging her. Everything looked like an ordinary adventure. When the moment came to perform the trick, no one stopped the process, even when they noticed that the system was tensioned incorrectly. The error was instantly apparent. What was supposed to be a short and controlled movement ended in a fall that left no chance. He died on the spot. The silence that followed was abrupt and unnatural. Initially, they tried to explain the incident as an accident, but phone records and messages quickly destroyed this version. Investigators reconstructed the full chronology of the preparations, including discussions of motives and intentions. It became obvious that they were aware of the risk, but deliberately took it under the guise of a joke. The court classified the case as intentional actions that led to death. This was little consolation for Sarah's family. She trusted people she considered friends and paid for it with her life. For the defendants, revenge intended as humiliation turned into convictions and the realization that some lessons have an irreversible price. Illinois, 2017. Clint Harper headed a logistics company's warehouse and built his power not on respect, but on fear. He shouted at his subordinates, publicly humiliated them for minor mistakes, and liked to remind them that everyone in the warehouse was easily replaceable. Complaints to the HR department went unanswered, and the management turned a blind eye to his methods because the performance indicators remained high. For Clint, results were always more important than people. One of the employees who had been under his pressure for years was Mark Wilson, a calm and non-confrontational man who had worked in the warehouse for over 6 years. He had a family, 2 children, and tried to hold on to his job despite the constant insults. Clint systematically took out his anger on him, used him as an example of a bad employee, and blocked any attempts at promotion. When Mark applied for an internal competition for a better position, Clint personally thwarted his candidacy by accusing him of fictitious violations. On the day Mark was called into the office and informed of his dismissal, he was already exhausted from months of tension. The conversation took place in a back room, away from other employees. Clint didn't hold back, calling Mark a failure and bluntly telling him that he would never achieve anything. The words came one after another, and none of them were accidental. For Clint, it was a familiar form of control. For Mark, it was the final point. When Clint took a step forward, gesturing and continuing to humiliate, the situation got out of hand. A heavy metal tool used to repair equipment was lying nearby. Everything happened in a few seconds. One blow was fatal. Clint fell to the concrete floor and never got up. His colleagues came running to hear the noise, but it was too late to help. The police arrived quickly, and Mark did not try to escape. During interrogation, he said little, only repeating that he could not take it anymore. The investigation revealed a long history of psychological pressure, testimonies from other employees, and a complete lack of response from management. The court recognized that the murder was the result of prolonged moral abuse, but this did not change the verdict. For the company, the death of the manager became a reason for an internal audit, and for Marco's family, it was a tragedy that began long before that day. The revenge in this story was not planned, but was the result of years of humiliation that slowly destroyed the man until one moment made everything irreversible. These stories show what revenge leads to when people stop waiting for the court or the system to decide. In each case, death was the result of specific actions and decisions, not an accident. Someone avoided responsibility for years, someone could not withstand the pressure, and someone decided to act on their own. In the end, all of these stories ended the same way, in death and criminal cases. If you are interested in such analyses, subscribe to the channel and like it.